What's up, guys? Coach Jared Richmond here with the Richmond Elite Podcast, and today we're bringing you episode 11. And today's guest is one of my good friends, Evan Schwerbrock. He is the blind strength coach, as some people know him. He is also the owner of Cane Enable Fitness. Evan is probably one of the smartest people I know when it comes to strength conditioning and exercise physiology. He's got a master's degree. What's your master's in?
Kinesiology with a concentration in applied exercise physiology.
Awesome. So yeah, we're super excited to have Evan here. I think it's going to be like a really fun and maybe a little bit more in-depth podcast than what we've done so far. So from there, I'll let Evan go ahead and give you the spiel on what he's been up to and who exactly he is.
Yeah, I feel like I talk about myself way too much on podcasts and different conference appearances. So if I'm missing anything, let me know. But I'm Evan. I'm from Central Illinois, and I met Jared when we were both going to University of Illinois Chicago, and I was pursuing my master's degree in kinesiology. That was within a year of losing most of my sight due to a disease called Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy. But I've been able to get different degrees and certifications since then, such as my Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist cert, among several others. And then gotten to be a professor for 4 years at Illinois Central College, strength coach in many different capacities. And like you said, I now own and operate Cane Enable Fitness, which is a fitness resource for the blind and visually impaired primarily, but I also work with sighted individuals as well. Get to work with people globally and do different conference appearances, seminars, fun things like that, as well as remote and in-person coaching. And then I also compete in strongman. So I've started getting into adaptive strongman recently and went to the world championships and everything and can demonstrably now say that I am the world's strongest blind man. So trying to use that title in order to help more visually impaired people around the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, I forgot to kind of dive into your kind of athletic background. Now that when Evan and I first met, I was competing. I was competing in CrossFit, and you were kind of in CrossFit at the moment too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and then I probably maybe a year later transitioned into Olympic weightlifting. So, anyways, when we first met, we were both competing, or maybe I was competing more than I am now. So I guess I forgot to go that route because now my brain is all kind of coach. Hopefully, after a recovery from this hip surgery, I can get back into competing. But Evan he's done some really impressive things. He actually, I told him, I think I take credit for this. I told you to get into strongman. Did I not?
You definitely encouraged it and
Maybe not.
helped me to because I kept going very anaerobic stuff with everything that we were doing, kind of CrossFitty,
Hmm.
and then you started going the weightlifting route when we were at the gym. And actually, I have a chance right now. I'm going to tell the story about how we actually met. So you had known my sister already, and I moved to Chicago because I knew I'd have her.
I actually told this story today.
Oh, did you?
Real quick, I actually told this story to somebody, like to one of my
Oh,
clients
okay.
today, because they were asking who was going to be on the
Uh huh.
podcast, and so I told them the story. So go
No, no,
ahead.
you.
Sorry.
I want to hear how you tell it, and then I'll add in the little flourishes.
I don't know if I think you should tell because I don't know, dude. I don't have the best memory. I've had a lot of concussions, so you go
Okay,
ahead.
so I heard about this guy who was really into CrossFit and everything through my sister, and you guys had been in passing and everything there at UIC, and then I was working out, and this was like my second week, and I was having a heck of a time. My sister just forced me to go get a cane, thank goodness, and I was learning how to navigate things, doing it that way, and this was like maybe my third time in the gym there, or at least that gym at UIC. And I was desperately looking for 2.5s. And it turned out at that gym randomly, like the Smith machine would have like 13 2.5s. Remember, we found that one day. But I was trying to do some squats and really
Yeah.
needed 2.5s. And I was just feeling around all these different weight stacks and everything. And it was like out of the fog of my blurry vision. It was like a dude goes, "Hey, man, you need help with finding something?" And it wound up being you. And you helped me find my 2.5s. And then we talked a bunch. And then we're hanging out by the lifting platforms. And you did 5 sets of 3 at 275 power cleans and stuff. And we were hanging out and talking shop about CrossFit and lifting and all this stuff. Wound up walking back because we lived like a block away from each other. So we spent like 6 hours together that very first day. You told me that your girlfriend at the time, now your wife, was a 10. Um, and I remember being like,
That wasn't on
This
day
was day,
one, was
yeah,
it?
this
Was
was
that
day
day
one.
one?
You told me that as we were entering my apartment, and then we sat and talked in my living room for a while too. I was like, man, this guy's kind of full of himself. There's no way that his girlfriend's that great. It turns out Becca's freaking awesome. So you were right. And yeah, we were just
See,
5 6
I don't
hours
lie,
together
man.
that very first day.
I did not see. I'm glad you told that because I'm gonna be honest, Evan. Like, I don't remember the second half of that story. Like, I don't really remember after leaving the
Oh,
gym,
really?
and that sounds really bad to say, but I don't.
Oh, it's okay. I included some of that in
So
the
I'll
speech at
add
your
something
wedding.
to that. See, I don't remember
That
that.
was probably a pretty long day for you. Yeah,
I mean, I remember the speech, but I don't remember that part of the
yeah.
speech. Sorry. So, anyways, I'm gonna add something. Just like I knew who you were. I think I had so after talking to Hannah, I talked to Hannah, your sister, the semester before. And I was talking about how I did CrossFit, and she was like, "Yeah, one of my brothers does CrossFit, and he's actually going to come here to school next year for his master's degree." And at the time, you were at Bradley, and so that was, I'm pretty sure, second semester of my would have been my. Did we meet my senior year then, or junior year? No,
Yeah, we
junior
met
year,
your
right?
junior year.
So it would have been the second semester um, of my sophomore year. She had told me that, and then she had mentioned how you had just recently kind of developed the optical nerve disease that you had. And so, anyways, I went home for the summer, and then I want to say it was like, one of the first couple days of school, I was in there, and there was a blind dude in there with a cane doing CrossFit essentially, and I was like, well, that must be her brother. So I helped you find two and a halves as my entryway into the into like becoming your friend.
Yeah, well, and thank goodness you did because it helped, and then we were able to spend way too much time in the gym together after that.
Yeah, those I trained a lot. We trained a lot. Like we looking back on that, like how much training volume we did. I mean, multiple like I don't remember too many days that we only went to the gym one time.
Yeah, and if we did, it was 3 4 hours, and then we would like hit the sauna
Yeah.
and chill out and stuff like that. Or I had some lifting equipment in that little gross patio out behind my apartment and do like kettlebell stuff and sandbag stuff too.
Yep. Yep. I remember that when you got the sandbags, that was a big
hmm
thing.
I thought it was heavy back then. Not anymore. I don't even mess with that one now.
All right. So what I like to do kind of first is have the guests kind of go through their entire like strength journey, their fitness journey. So can you kind of walk us all the way back to like when you played sports in high school? We have a lot of youth athletes that listen to this podcast. So I just want to kind of, go way back and you walk me through it. Take as much time as you want.
Okay, yeah. So I was the tiny little nerdy kid growing up. Everyone says that I'm joking because I'm like 6'3", 250 now. But that was definitely not the case. I was so freaking skinny. I dressed up as Harry Potter one year, and all it took was I already had the glasses that were usually broken. Sometimes clumsiness, sometimes bullying, and it just took a wizard hat, and it was like, boom, that kid's Harry Potter. So yeah, just very academically inclined. I love reading, I love learning, everything like that, and was intellectually talented because of that hard work. That um, even if I didn't have homework, there was intellectual things to be done at home, and yeah, just wound up developing more and getting like into basketball. I liked that a lot. I was forced to play baseball for way too many years. I never got a chance to say no. It was just like, hey, you're signed up for baseball. I was like, gosh darn it. I was always too little and frail to play football or even have a chance at it. I remember I did football camp. It was non-contact one year, and they're like, Evan was really enthusiastic, and that was it. Where you're just like, oh, you seem to enjoy wearing a football helmet. That was the only like positive thing. It wasn't like, hey, Evan should go out football. It was like, low key, all the adults just like Evan would get crushed. Do not encourage him to play football. So I didn't, and wound up getting into seventh and eighth grade, I remember there was a team from Stark County, the smallest county in the state, but they had a couple of really big boys who were like 6'3", just grew early, and they were shoving our team around. And it was like, yeah, you guys got to be able to be bigger and stronger, and hope you catch up growth wise in order to like compete with these guys. Um, Wound up getting into lifting and everything like that, and we started kind of developing as a team, and got a lot better by my freshman year. And by freshman year, high school academics was not a problem for me. I would do maybe 20 minutes of homework a day, and it would just be like, I'm about to pass out in bed. I'm going to roll over, do my homework, put it down, good to go. So that school wasn't really challenging enough for me. So I spent all my waking time playing basketball. Like, I had a basketball in my bed and do shooting drills before I went to sleep. I would stay after, instead of playing sports, I would be doing dribbling drills and like passing against a wall at the playground, and until I got picked up 2 hours after school. Like, it was obsessive, and helped teach me that I need to work very, very hard at stuff in order to get better whatsoever. So eventually all that effort and everything that I was putting in, which was definitely even more than like the basketball stars at the school, it really started catching up, started getting better. But also, again, academically, I wasn't being challenged whatsoever. So I wound up going off to a boarding school, applying and getting into the Illinois Math and Science Academy. It's known as like one of the best high schools in the country by far, and they needed a kid from the country, I think. So I got let in. And then all of a sudden academics was really, really hard again. But I kept wanting to push basketball and work on lifting and everything like that. Wound up, struggling through the academic part for sure, especially like maturity wise. Again, I had to work very, very hard to be able to be talented at anything. And, there was a lot of buildup necessary. And I was definitely like one of the dumb they are. So, I'd have to put in more work, but then that meant less sleep, and then that meant I would have to sacrifice basketball and lifting and all that stuff, and I wasn't willing to do that. So then I wound up, barely sleeping for like 3 years. But luckily, my PE teacher was a former bodybuilder, and she was freaking jacked, Mrs. Myers, and was able to talk to her. And I just stayed after class for PE all the time. I didn't do this for like organic chemistry or advanced physics or anything like that, but I would stick around after PE class at this nerd academy and just ask her probably just the dumbest questions. And looking back, she was beyond patient with me, and that's a lesson that I really try to give to my clients now as well. Be able to be nice and patient and answer all the questions, because that learning phase is so incredibly important. But she helped as a good role model for me. And then in my junior year there, your junior and senior years, you have the opportunity to, every Wednesday, there's no school, so you have the opportunity to go off and do research or sleep for once, different things like that. So I chose to do a research project at Northwestern University, and it was at the Feinberg School of Medicine there on Michigan Avenue. And I researched with stroke patients the force velocity curve. You can use like a $250,000 robot and accidentally put in holes in walls and everything like that, but like essentially doing a research project as a 16-year-old, which I did not do a great job of looking back, but it helped me get more and more into like physical therapy and helping people in different circumstances, not just athletes, but from the athletic standpoint too. Me and a friend started the student athletic trainer program there, where you had to accumulate so many different like volunteer work hours at the academy as well, because you weren't busy enough. So was one of the couple of people who started the athletic trainer thing and started basically shadowing and learning, and then also helping like taping ankles and supervising sporting events and everything like that as a high school junior and senior, as basically a athletic trainer apprentice. So got to do that. And then I kind of dreamed of going off to physical therapy school once I was an undergrad, and I was working out all the time, and I realized all the physical therapy students are in the library all the time and they think I'm insane for being in the gym all the time. Then I was like, I need to pivot here. So I started shadowing the strength conditioning coaches there at Bradley University, and thinking, man, I'm going to do more strength conditioning stuff. Like, I'll work with elite athletes, because I don't want to work with like people when they're already broken and then just put band-aids on it, which a lot of physical therapy is. I was like, I need to get a hold of people
Right.
before they're broken. So started doing that a little bit. And then I had a gap year in between undergrad and applying for grad schools all over the place and everything, when I was working at like YMCA doing strength coaching for high school, running clients through the YMCA and everything like that, and different boot camps and stuff. And then I was also supervising a college weight room nearby. So working many different fitness related jobs that year when all of a sudden my eyes started to go. We could dig into that if you want, but I've been on enough podcasts
Yeah,
talking
let's
about
do
when
it.
that happens. But
No, let's do it. I think, obviously we're not going to have another guest on like you that has like your story. And I think losing your vision is a big part of, your story. So let's dive into it.
okay, so this was just about 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago now. Um,
So how old are
I
you?
was 22. Yeah, so this was November into the December
Okay.
of 2014. Uh, yeah, I was kind of brought in. So I played a lot of volleyball in college with some of my friends and some like kind of pro-am rec leagues at different levels and stuff, and was encouraged to play for the club team. And once I was in a tournament with them and beat the club team with a group of my friends, I was like, I'm good. I don't want to play with those guys. And we're fine. So did pretty well when it came to volleyball. So then when I was back home in Little Kewanee, Illinois, some of the people I used to go to school with invited me because they knew I was in town again, and 6'3" and stuff. They invited me to play on their team. So like I had 2-3 weeks in a row where I was brought in as like a ringer, and like the team would show up a little inebriated and stuff, and then it was just like Evan will take care of it, and I did. And then one week
Right.
I got hit in the face by a volleyball. Somebody spiked it. It was actually my old eighth grade teacher. So it's like my teacher hit me in the face. That had never happened before. I'd never been hit in the face playing volleyball. I was always fine, and like I was like, I didn't even see it coming. What in the world? It's like I need a new contact or something. Like the lights in here today are bugging me. Later in that game, I went to throw up the ball to serve it, and it was like it just disappeared. I was like, well, that's not good. And I still had the like idea to like I'm just gonna swing when I think it's coming, and I swing, I hit it, but it lands like 8 foot in front of me, and the rest of the time I was absolutely terrible. I was like, what the heck is going on? Was never invited back after that day, which totally makes sense. It was a couple days later. I went and visited some friends in Peoria, Illinois, about a 45-minute drive, and they were still going to college at Bradley University. Then I was coming back that night. It was a Friday night, and it was a little bit foggy, and I was just like, "Oh, that's weird," but I'll be fine. I've driven so many times in so many like crazy circumstances in my truck. Um, we'll be good. But I get on the highway, and it's like I can only see like two of the dashed lines ahead of me. I was like, this is not good. So I was driving 30 miles an hour on the highway with semis blowing past me, going twice as fast. I'm still not sure, outside of God's providence, how I made the turn, like the exit, and knew where it was off of the highway. And then another 20 miles home. I did miss one turn then and realized like kind of what I was seeing in my peripheral that I had to turn back. And uh, by the time I was about 4 or 5 miles away from home, there's no lines on the road there. So I was
Mm.
literally driving by feel and just feeling how much gravel was underneath my right wheels compared to when I was like on proper asphalt, because it's a pretty narrow road as well. Yeah, I just drove the last few miles again by feel, going real slow and everything, and I was like, well, luckily I had scheduled a an eye appointment for the next morning. I was like, well, hopefully we'll get that figured out tomorrow, get me some new contacts, and be good to go. So in the eye doctors, and this is very gruff, old former army doctor with like the big strong mustache and like never smiles and all this stuff, and always very very gruff. And we're trying to figure out what's going on, use different lenses up front and everything. He's like, I am at a loss. I cannot fix anything. Like your left eye is really messed up, and your right eye you're barely legal to drive, like barely. And I was like, well, it could be this disease called Leber's that could run in my family.
You looked it up? You looked up the disease?
No, so
Oh,
our
okay.
uncle had it for years. And we were told as kids, like, hey,
Gotcha.
just make sure you're not like abusing drugs and alcohol and stuff, and like being really mean to your body, and then you'll be okay. And um, even if you have the gene, which we didn't know if we had the gene, we just know it was somewhere in the family, and it tend to produce itself. It's passed down through females, and it tends to show itself in males. And even if you did get that passed on to you as a male, it's still only a 50% chance that you're even going to develop it, even if you happen to have the gene. So, um, yeah, we
Right.
were kind of, reassured as kids. And I was like, well, I mean, this is a possibility, I guess. I don't know. And so we go get an optic nerve, and this gruff army doc comes back, and he's like almost crying. And I was like, all right, figured it out. So drove home, and this was, let's see, 10 years and 1 week ago. Drove home, put my keys away, and that was it. It was just, we're going to figure it out from here. I gave myself 2 days to mope a little bit, sit on the couch and kind of digest. And then it was, okay, I'm going to quit applying to any other grad schools besides UIC because luckily I'll have my sister there as a support system. I am going to talk to one of my bosses and talk about accommodations and what we can do in order to make sure I can keep working and keep plowing through. And my family's going to drive me to jobs, and people are probably going to think I had a DUI or something. That's why I'm being driven everywhere. And we'll just see what happens. Unfortunately, there were some more distant members of the family who had some big mouths, and so word got out there. Oh, Evan's blind. So then there was the whole like, oh, Evan can't be blind. You guys are a bunch of liars. He's in the gym and da da da. So led to some fun small town controversy and everything.
People didn't believe you?
Yeah, my brother had gotten out there that so Jake was some girl was talking to him. She's
Yeah.
like, he's working out at XPF, so you guys are a bunch of liars. He's not blind. And meanwhile, I'm there just like learning how to feel plates and understand how much they weigh and memorize where stuff is and like having a heck of a time. And she's telling my brother that we're a bunch of liars. So yeah, there were some funny little obstacles. So it was good to kind of get out of the way
That's
immediately
pretty
because
crazy.
I mean you've been around some of the dumb stuff, and I can remember some stories, probably better than you, about some of the silly stuff that happened at UIC. But there's one that I know you were very much involved in with the guy stalking me and everything by a squat rack. But yeah, kind of helped me understand
Yeah,
why
go
people
ahead,
are going
go
to be
through
freaking
it.
weird about it, and you got to adapt and power through. So here we are.
Yep, awesome. Well, I just think, people need to understand like kind of the journey and that you didn't have this for the first, what, 21, 22 years of your
Hmm.
life, right? And I think it takes a special kind of person to be able to overcome something that is, brought onto you later in life like that, and to essentially be able to continue your life um, pretty seamlessly. I mean, obviously, you've had to change a lot of things, but fitness, didn't drop. Like you could have easily just said, like, okay, I'm done working out, right? Like, I mean, I think that could have been something that would have like a lot of people would have done.
Hmm.
But I mean, it turns out that you're the strongest you've ever been,
Oh,
right?
by far, yeah.
And I think there's a lot of it. Yeah, there's a lot of kids, especially youth athletes and just athletes in general that have some adversity, right? Like I've had injuries. I mean, you've had injuries. There's been a lot of things, and I don't know. I just think it's important to note that, like, if you can do what you've done and been able to, become the world's strongest blind person, I think you can overcome pretty much anything.
Absolutely, and I'm not a genetic freak either. My very first time, I kind of left this out, but my first time lifting was the football coaches brought us in before like eighth grade, and they're like trying to show us different exercises so we kind of like know what the heck we were doing when we came in the first time with all the group training stuff. And I remember exactly which coach it was. I remember exactly where I was standing to this day because it left such an imprint on me. I remember who else was in my group, everything. Um, but he told me to do a clean and press with just the bar, and like kind of explained it. And so I barely got to my shoulders, and I'm quivering, and I try to use leg drive, and I get it just above my head, and then my arms give out. I couldn't lock it out. I hit myself in the head, hit myself in the shoulders, drop it on the ground. And he goes, just get out of here. Like that was my first time lifting. So yeah, there's gonna be all kinds of adversity, and it's just really if you're still consistent and keep plowing through, and then making good on all the fun social interactions that can come with training and everything as well. Because I was very blessed to meet people like you at the gym, and that be able to encourage things all the more as well.
Yeah, and I think what's cool about our training is like maybe when we first started training together, we were training relatively similarly, but you know. pretty quickly, like our training wasn't necessarily the same
Mhm.
in any way, but and our goals weren't like you had similar goals as far as like get stronger. But like we would be both on different training programs. Like I don't know if there was a time where we were running the same thing. I mean, you might remember, but we still, I mean, we trained pretty much together every single day and supported each other, and like, I mean, that's the strongest I've been, like, was when I was training with you. So, um, I just think it's important to note that, like, at our gym, we have a lot of athletes that play different sports, right? We have basketball, baseball, football, whatever. I mean, we have ice skaters, figure skaters, right? And then we have, your strong men. We have a couple people that train like strongman style. We have a couple power lifters. We have a lot of Olympic weightlifters.
You got
Point
strongman
being,
training going
everybody,
right now? You got people doing that?
we got a couple people that come do some strongman
Oh,
stuff,
I
but
never met them when I was
not a
I
ton.
had the worst timing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's you know, we came in like the middle of the day a lot of times when we get training in, where a lot of people come more in the
Mhm.
evenings. Um, so yeah, anyways, just a lot of different people with different goals, but they all have lofty goals and they all have goals that, it requires a lot of hard training to go through. And it's good to be able to relate to somebody. And I think that was like how we hit it off was, the other people at the gym were not as serious about it as we were, not even close,
No.
right? And yeah, we were able to bond over I think just the level that we both wanted to take the training. Like, I would say, like, I'm running this program, and you would know exactly the program. Like, where if I said that program to anybody else, they'd be like, what's that? Right. And so we were digesting the same material online. We were, listening, reading the same books, kind of living in the same circles. And then we both had, some pretty high, I think, ambitions. And so it didn't really matter that we had these different goals. It didn't matter at all, and it pushed us both.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of our development and you were way better with the whole high ambitions thing than I ever was. And it kicked in maybe a couple years ago with me fully. But you're always like, man, I'm gonna go lift at the Arnold and all this stuff, and I was kind of like happy to be there. But we were both very much like, we're not just gonna talk; we're actually gonna like do stuff and really get after it. I'm sure you're gonna
Right.
know who I'm talking about, but there was a guy who was always like, "Oh, I'm a coach, I'm a coach, I'm a coach," and he's like, "Yeah, you can get more whip out of the bar going overhead if you like put them on the weights on the outside, and blah blah blah." And it was like, you're putting like 200 overhead. The whip doesn't matter yet. Or I was like really proud that he decided he was going to squat
Hmm.
not facing a mirror and like come reverse out of the rack and junk. And that dude would like interrupt graduate school classes and everything because he just learned something in undergrad. And like I had to tell him, like, dude, stop talking. We're actually having a class here. And it was just because he just like thought he was discovering everything and would only talk. He would barely train and was like, I'm a coach. Like it was his first name. And it's like, man, like, no, you're not. And quit offering to coach us because we're like doing the thing, we're learning more, and we're not just talking. We're like bringing in information and trying to assimilate it. We're also putting all this junk into practice as well. And so we were already like well beyond his capabilities in both realms because we weren't just talking ourselves up constantly. So I think that was huge.
Oh
And
yeah, I remember who you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. But oh man, my best friend. So another thing
Well,
too is,
yeah, I was just gonna say, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I think too that you've always been better at like not thinking other people are better than you. Like they might have been better lifters or have more notoriety at that point or something. I remember just being like, oh yeah, that's Chad West, his Smith over there and stuff like that. And then there's me like embarrassing myself with people at the Arnold when we're hanging out there. And then that lesson the hard way. And now it's just like, I mean, a week ago, I got like, like a bro hug from the 4-time world's strongest man, Magnus Magnuson. And I'm just like, oh, what's up, Magnus? So being able to understand, like, if you just keep pushing and you don't like idolize people in an unhealthy way, you can, get closer and closer to like achieving way more than you even thought you could.
I think for me, it was just because I wanted to be, like, I wanted to be on the same level as
Mhm.
them, that I felt like I couldn't idolize them, right? Like, I thought that kind of was weird, right? Like, I thought, like, well, if you're trying to maybe beat them someday, or like, be on the same level as them or be their friend, like you can't really like idolize them. So I don't know. I still get like that sometimes though. So, but what I wanted to go back to, his name's Brandon. You remember Brandon, right?
Oh, we're using the name. Okay.
That was yeah, we're calling him out. If he watches this, then dude, Brandon, hit me up, man. I miss you. Not really. But anyway, so he was just very, and this is important, I think, to talk about because he was very dogmatic about his ideas to the point where he had a lot of like paralysis by analysis. And he would try to coach me a lot because he was a Olympic weightlifter kind of, right? Like he'd done the Olympic lifts.
Kind of.
And so he would try to coach me. Yeah, exactly. Um, Meanwhile, I mean, I was out snatching him by probably 50 kilos. I don't know, like something
Yeah.
stupid, and out clean and jerking him by even more. But anyways, he would try to coach me because, and it, to be fair, I was definitely raw. Like my technique was pretty raw at the time. But the thing that I had down was I trained really hard. And I think you can make up for a lot by just training hard. And here's the thing, like my technique was going to get better and it did get
Hmm.
better. Um, the more I trained and the more I did it. I was really early in my career. So it wasn't like I was doing anything wrong. I just needed more time to fine tune my technique where somebody like him pretty much would have said, "Hey, you need to not add any weight to the bar, essentially, until your technique looks like this. And until it looks like this, it's not good, right?" Um, and I think that just shows you like that's not how you become successful in life or in fitness. Like in situations are never going to be perfect, and you kind of just got to do it and give yourself the time and the grace to
Well,
fail.
that's another really good thing. So when I talked about him interrupting one of the classes I was in, when he wasn't even in the class, he was just in the gym setting that we were in that physical education building. He had learned about biarticulate muscles the day before, so muscles that cross more than one joint. And he was like, "Yeah, so it doesn't make sense to train those properly and everything." And he's like, "Why would you ever do a Romanian deadlift then?" And I was like, because it makes junk harder and then you don't have to lift as much. And he was like, started like arguing with the whole class and like trying to like take over. And eventually I had to cut him off and be like, "Hey, you just learned about it yesterday. Like, cut it out." And he would just get like you said, just very rigid. Just like, "Oh, there's no point in that then." And I was like, well, a lot of very strong people, very developed people who do RDLs for a specific reason. And also, like, you can bring up like Paul Anderson. He was trying to purposely take some muscles out of this situation, send you more train some of the muscles that are still very active when you're doing that more isolation exercise. Like, it is on purpose. It doesn't mean like you learn about something one day and all of a sudden you write off all isolation exercises and junk like that. Yeah, so I think
Mhm.
as inflexible as I am physically, like I think it's very important to be intellectually more open minded and like, hey, this is a tool. When is an appropriate time to use this tool and like actually get after it?
Yeah. So, all right, I think it's time to get into kind of like we train a lot of high school athletes, right? A lot of even a lot of college athletes too. And I think you are you're a strength coach, right? Like there's things that and then some scientific stuff that I probably am not up to date with. So, if you had to kind of go back and this could be super scientific or not, it doesn't need to be. But if you had to go back to when you were, a younger athlete per se, what would you tell yourself, or what would you do differently, or what would you have done the same thing?
I would have trained more and trained harder and like actually followed a plan. Um, Especially when you don't have your parents there or necessarily a ton of adult guidance when you're like at boarding school and you can just go to the fitness center at the time that it's open and do stuff. That was very problematic because I didn't have the accountability. So it wasn't just like, "Hey, did you actually go to the gym today?" And it was just like, no, I decided to hang on my
Mhm.
like or play basketball on the courts outside or something like that. Like I wasn't accountable to a plan. So I'd figure out some sort of reputable plan and just make sure I have forward momentum. So I'm not just like slacking off on leg day or something. Or like running the stairs around our gym was a big thing. So one time me and my buddy picked a workout out of a muscle and fitness and we warmed up with some stair laps, like half a mile of stairs. And then we hit this lower body workout. I can still remember exactly what Muscle and Fitness like magazine it was from. July issue. It was called Red, White, and Huge Workout, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna get after this. It's gonna be crazy. We're gonna be
Wow.
jacked. We do that, like deadlifts for the first time, really, all this junk, get very overzealous, and we're just like, we can still walk, so let's run another mile of stairs. So we do that. We weren't able to walk properly for the next week. But we're like, that was a really good workout. But like, what if I had toned it down a little bit, like made sure I was locking stuff in and then like played the long-term progression? What if I run that every week for 8 weeks? That would have been way, way better. But then also stringing together good workouts and understanding what more effective reps were. I know there's just so many times in my training career where I've done like, 5 sets of 10 and maybe 6 of those reps within the 50 reps were like really effective. So not having so much junk volume, but being
Hmm.
able to, in smaller amount of sets, push or like utilize the sets that I'm given in order to push a little bit closer towards actual failure, and just making sure I'm kind of flirting with that a little bit more instead of just racking up a ton of junk volume, especially with my back, with my scoliosis and everything. It's something that I'm really learning to take into account, and especially with all the strongman stuff and trying to run with 300 pounds in your hands and junk like that. Like being able to get a lot out of a little uh, really adds up, especially if you're still playing sports.
So junk volume, I just want to like define it for our athletes, but essentially what I think you mean is basically like let's say we do a set of 10 and 8 out of those 10 reps look good and the last two look like you're, to say look like crap, right? Though that would kind of be junk volume where you could have just done the 8 reps instead of doing the extra two that were crap.
Yeah, or like if you're doing like the classic German volume training of like 10 to the 10, but it's like 40% of your max, and like the first 6 sets are just like basically a
Mm.
warm up and just like you're just moving to move, and it's not really getting any sort of stimulus. So it's got to be like an appropriate amount of volume, intensity, and frequency that aren't just like, oh, I'm moving to move. Like if you do like a set of, I don't know, 50 like band press downs or something, and it's, if you're not just aiming for tendon recovery and stuff, if you're like, oh, I'm going to grow muscle from this set of 50, and you kind of got burning like the last couple, and you're like, okay, now I'm done. It's like, what were the other 48 even for? Like, you should have gone heavier or like picked a better exercise or something like that. So I definitely would have tried to optimize things, not again the paralysis by analysis, but just made sure that my efforts weren't in vain and were higher quality.
Okay. So now let's say, that was kind of maybe your advice to yourself, like your general advice. How would you maybe, how many days per week, how would you structure kind of training for, let's say, let's just go into, like you said, you play basketball. How would you generally structure like a basketball player's training program in high school?
I would have a couple days of strength training. Are we thinking like off season?
Yeah, let's go off season.
Okay. A couple days of like full body strength training for sure, and then being able to layer in progressive plyometrics would be really good. I always wanted to jump high. I had like those jump sole things and push the jump stuff too
Yeah.
far. I wound up getting Achilles tendonitis so bad once like I started jumping better, and then I went over the edge because I was just like, oh, I should do more. Like no, it should have worked a lot more on recovery and progression and like building up the capacity of my different tissues. So I would focus a lot on like hip and ankle stability and like different ranges of motion as well. Everybody will just do squats and be like, oh, I'll get my hips strong. But really, I actually wound up having to my
Mhm.
senior year basically compete in like a giant diaper. I was playing basketball and I'd have to go with the athletic trainer. And I would stand tables so they could reach my waist, and they would like wrap ace bandage in order to like turn my hip into just like mummified remains of just like it's to hold it still enough to where he's not in terrible pain. Um, and that was just from being frail, too weak, and then also not training different ranges of motion and just being run into the ground. And I was just not built for that because I didn't make myself durable enough. So yeah, I think a couple days of again the progressive isometrics or sorry plyometrics. I mean isometrics wouldn't hurt either, but like if you're going to do that stuff, make sure you're doing actual isometrics. Remember like reading some and buying like little bands, and it was like isometrics, but it was only like 5% muscle activation. Looking back, and you're like, oh, that did nothing. Okay, um,
We got to define these things real
okay,
quick, Evan. Plyometrics going to be jumping, bounding, um, sprinting, right? Like things like that. Um,
yeah. And then with the plyometrics,
Isometrics. Go
with the
ahead.
plyometric stuff, I tend to go two different directions. So there's Verkhoshansky from the old USSR who like invented plyometrics for track and field and like a lot of shot putters and stuff. And he defined plyometrics by like the intensity and really wanted you to have like at least a body weight and a half back squat before you even played with plyometrics. So that's like the intense stuff, like crazy box jumps, like weighted or depth jumps, things like that. So I think that would be at least one day. But then also the lighter plyometric stuff. Let's think about like you said, bounding, sprinting, even just jump roping in order to get those ground contacts. Like those ground contacts are very different than a crazy depth jump. So keeping those stimuli separate and not
Gotcha.
overdoing them as well. And then, sorry, I should define isometrics as well. That's where you're just holding a position. There's different kinds, like a functional, a yielding, all these different things. But it's basically nothing's moving, and you're having to just maintain hard tension. So imagine like you put a bar underneath um, the pins of a squat rack and make sure that squat rack can't move, and then you try to like deadlift that up while maintaining a really good position and everything. That would be like a deadlift isometric to hit a certain range of motion. And then typically isometrics will swing. Actually, your brain is just trying to make sure you're not just strong in this very, very specific position. It's like, oh, I need to be strong around that position because I'm getting a stimulus there. So there tends to be this bleeding over effect of about 10 to 15 degrees of joint angle, either direction of the angle that you train. So that's a really good way to like, if you were to do like that at the bottom of your like quarter squat, where you'd be typically doing an athletic jump from, different things like that is a kind of an example.
Gotcha. Okay. So just wanted to find those really quick. So you had said you would do a lot of, you obviously, um, full body strength training, right? I think that's probably the base of everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you said, would you now? How would you separate it? Would you say, would you have your strength training days and your plyo days, or would you kind of do it concurrently?
I would probably keep those on separate days just to keep the stimulus different. And then I would probably do the plyometric days before the strength training days, just in case we get any like leftover axial fatigue, and then also like general soreness. I know my hamstrings get sore just from a good deep back squat for several days, so I want to avoid that in order to get the highest quality out of my plyometrics. Plus, the nervous system is going to be a bit more replenished, everything like that. And then another thing that I wish I had known before is I would practice basketball a lot. I would do a lot, play one on one with people, shoot like crazy. But then when it came to game time, I wasn't used to like being under duress or moving different directions or coming off of a screen and everything like that, and just being ready to shoot. And I would look up people like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and how they actually practice at game speed, if not faster, and then practice that and progressively build up that intensity and like the workload in the off season. I know Anthony Edwards was on an interview talking about how he was in his pre-draft workout and Steve Kerr was there, and he was like, man, I got after it. I was destroying it. Me and my trainer were just like, we were showing out. And then at the end, Steve Kerr's like, was that it? Was like the warm up? And he's like, well, no, man, that was a full workout. He's like, oh, you got to work harder. And it like put in his head, he's like, oh man, I got to take it to another level. Like there, you don't know what you don't know until you're like exposed to it. It's like it's really heavy lifting. I wound up being around Dan Bell, who's got the best powerlifting total of all time, because he happened to train out of the gym that we were at in Kewanee, Illinois, of all places. And you're like, oh, I had to spot this guy who squats over a grand and everything. Like he was going to do a 600-pound front squat, and I had to go spot him in the back for that. It's like, oh, there's levels here, and like there's way more to be achieved, and like you could go way harder, way heavier, like all this stuff is possible. So I would you'll figure out how to practice way harder, not be like, oh, I shot a bunch of shots or I was in the gym for 2 hours. It's about what you're actually getting out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, it changes. Well, a couple of things to unpack there. First thing, as far as practicing basketball more, and then kind of the intensity of your practice, it goes back to, and I think you've probably heard me say this before, but I'm not a huge fan of like the whole like idea that you can just do light technique work for
Mm-hmm.
weightlifting. because the intensity, which in our terms is the weight on the
Hmm.
bar, right, is so
Hmm.
low that it's very easy to have good technique with that weight, or it's very easy to get away with poor technique with that
Hmm.
weight, right? And still make a lift and still make it feel good. Same thing goes to basketball. If you're shooting wide open jumpers in practice with like no breathing heavy, they're not contested in any way, you have all the time in the world to shoot, one, you're probably going to be able to get away with um, some stuff that you're not going to be able to get away with, right? When the intensity is higher, like in a
Hmm.
game. And then also, like, it's not technique practice because the technique that's going to be required in a game is going to be different than what's required when there's nobody on you. So that's the first thing I wanted to unpack. And then the second thing is just going down the lines of like changing your perspective on what's possible. So Dan Bell for you, you know, squatting over 1,000 pounds, hitting this monster total, seeing that that was possible. And I think that is probably the biggest thing that I see with the kids that we train is, we get them one to squat, first thing, like they all squat deep. Like they're all gonna like go to depth on squats. Like, I mean, how many times in high school do you see kids that don't hit depth on squat? Almost all
Oh
of them,
yeah,
right? Like,
just go to
I
my
mean,
hometown. Yeah, it's all there is. So.
yeah, nobody squats back parallel, right, in high school. So when we get them, we tell them, hey, you're gonna squat as deep as you could squat, essentially, and that's first, like they're like don't believe that they're gonna be able to get back up from it, or they don't believe they're gonna be able to go that
Hmm.
low, and then they do it, and they're like, oh, okay, like I can do this. So that's the first thing, and that's just an example of something, right? We do that with a lot of exercises, different ranges of motion that they maybe aren't used to doing. But the other thing is just training frequency, training volume. It's all these things like, hey, we're going to squat twice this week. And they'd be like, wait a second, you can squat more than once a week and you're not going to explode. Like your knees aren't going to explode. Right. Like that's like seriously, like these people, for whatever reason, we've developed, and I understand it. Like if you've never been around somebody who does it, all you know is what you've been told. And a lot of people are being told, hey, you train legs once a week. Right.
Hmm.
And so when we say, hey, we're going to squat twice a week this week, they're like, holy cow, like I just squatted the other day. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it today. And they didn't, they do it and they don't die. And they realize that you can do
Hmm.
that. And then eventually they realize you can squat 3 times a week, you know? And so then there's the frequency part. And then I said the volume. It's like, oh, hey, we're going to do five, we are going to do like 3 sets of 10 at a heavy weight today. And they're like, oh my God, like, it sucks, right? Sets of 10
Hmm.
suck. And they do it and they don't like it, but they realize it's possible. And so it all goes back to, I think that the biggest problem that I see in youth athletes is just not understanding what it takes to be good.
Hmm.
That's for me, the overarching thing is just not understanding what it takes and thinking that you're doing what it takes and that you're just maybe not genetically gifted enough, or that you're just, you know what I'm saying, like somehow you've been dealt a bad hand and that you're not as responsive to training as somebody
Hmm.
else, when you probably just don't realize that the other people are just out training you by a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've developed a disease that exposed a mitochondrial deficiency, so I'm not able to recover as well. Technically, I'm not able to produce energy as well. I have crazy scoliosis, where if I would go in and like show the doctors, they'd be like, "We need to put rods in your back," and like all this other stuff.
No, you
But
really do
yeah,
though. You really have crazy
yeah,
scoliosis. It's
yeah, we
bad.
have.
And I just wanted to touch on that because I hear these people, oh, I got scoliosis, I got this. Dude, Evan's back looks like the Nile River. I mean, it's like a freaking snake. It's like whoosh, like this. And what's your best deadlift?
650.
Yeah. And he deadlifts 650 pounds. Shut up. You're fine.
Yeah, yeah. I actually had that today. Somebody like asking about scoliosis, and I was like, "We don't gotta talk." Um, but yeah, like so, like carrying 700 pounds on my back and running with that is not cozy and perhaps not safe. But like, I want to
Right.
push boundaries and stuff. But there's all these different excuses of like, oh, why I couldn't do stuff, and yet I've been at competitions like, it's starting to veer towards bragging here, but like I was at Illinois Strongest Man in 2019. I got first place in every event in my class. and they were actually did like a pound for pound thing where all the men were doing all the same thing, and I got second just to a guy who competes internationally and was on some a lot of extracurriculars. So it's like
Yeah. I
it's
remember, wasn't
doable
I
if
at that?
put yourself in an opportunity. And actually, that was probably the highest event frequency. I just trained within reason. I was touching the event so often. I was so skilled at like picking up a 300-pound keg and throwing it over a bar because I just like ingrained that in my body and built those capacities appropriately. Because like I know you're a big fan of frequency and the appropriate volume. Is I just slowly built that stuff up, and then like once it was game day, it was so easy. I wasn't really that tired. It was just like another training day, but you get to ramp up because you got way more in the tank.
Yeah, I think to kind of touch on what you said, like, yeah, I mean, people that know me know that I preach volume and frequency like over everything, which, because I just think that that's probably the biggest thing that's missed. I think it's the thing that everybody wants to focus on exercise selection. Because if I'm being honest, that's like, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's like mental masturbation. Like you're not doing anything. You're just like, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. That's why I'm not getting stronger. And it's like, well, you might be doing the right thing, just not enough of
Mm-hmm.
it, right? Or you're not doing it
Mm-hmm.
correctly. One of the things. But everyone wants to blame the thing that they're doing. Well, this exercise doesn't work for me, right? Or this doesn't, this this training program that this coach, doesn't work for me. And it's like, well, yeah, you're doing every exercise
Mm-hmm.
incorrectly, right? And so I just think that volume and frequency are two variables that can very easily be changed. But the problem is those are very uh, directly, like those are hard things. Like those are like basically, if I say increase your frequency or increase your volume, I just made you do more work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, essentially, right? And I think that's very hard for people to confront sometimes because they think they're working hard. And when I say you need to do more, they're like, really? Like, I think I am working hard. And it's like, you might be working hard, but here's the other thing. So we've talked about this, how everybody, like, you might not have the best genetics for a lot of things, right? You said how you were scrawny, right, growing up, and I think I have some decent genetics, but I mean, we're not, I'm not Saquon Barkley, you're not, you know, whoever, right? Like, we are not the most genetically gifted people. So that definitely does play a
Mm-hmm.
factor. Um, I don't want to act like it doesn't. But what I'm saying is that each athlete, like I don't get to sit here, like nobody cares who's more genetically gifted. They just care who's
Mm-hmm.
better, right? And you know, nobody gets to use the excuse in sports of like at the end of the game when the other team wins, you don't get to be like, yeah, well, they're more genetically gifted than me, or he's more genetically gifted than me. So I just think that you have to do what it
Yeah.
takes. It's kind of like weight loss, right? Like I think we know that a lot of people struggle with what's like thyroid disease, right? Or different
Mm-hmm.
factors. And it makes it harder for them to lose weight, but it doesn't mean that they can't
Mm-hmm.
do it, right? And I think that's why we always say at my gym we have something called whatever it takes, or like the saying is always whatever it takes. And the point is like you and me might do the same exact program, the same exact training volume, and we one of us might get better results from
Mm-hmm.
it because of genetic factors,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then, so what the other person might have to do is they might have to do more training volume to get the same result. And that's okay, right? Like I just think that more people need to understand that you might have to train harder than the next guy, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Absolutely. I mean, my pressing is a big issue. I mean, we're gonna have to talk off camera in order to help parse that out because that's definitely lagging for me. But um, like I just did an adaptive strongman showcase at official strongman games and was able to pick up like the heaviest sandbags that they had and run them and everything, and like people were just blown away. But I'm genetically blessed with big long arms. I did a lot of farm work growing up, and like it doesn't take that much back work for me to get really good at like just picking something off the ground and holding it into myself and running with it. So there are some blessings, and I like you could outpress me any day of the week, but when it comes to just picking up something weird and moving with it, like I got that, but it doesn't take as much work for me to progress on that as it would for me pressing. So like we're all blessed with different stuff. And it's really just a matter of how much you
That's a good
make good
point.
on your genetic blessing. Like if you're already in that defeatist mentality, and with the weight loss thing, it's all that too. People identify as I am fat. And it's like, well, quit voicing it.
Hmm.
First of all, that's gonna just make it worse, and it's gonna
Right.
be a self fulfilling prophecy. So I'm really big on uh, like mantras or like you said, whatever it takes in order to get myself just from completely shutting down because going blind and then having to figure out Chicago and grad school with professors trying to tell me, hey, you don't belong here, you should leave like week one. That was really difficult. I was in a rough spot. Like the gym was my therapy for sure, but I started going, I'm going to do one thing every day that really
Hmm.
scares me. And if I don't want to do it, I'm going to do it anyway. And I would just do something scary every day, started making these short little to-do lists, and it just helped me start maximizing my potential. And if we think about genetic gifts, it's it's few and far between they're going to be able to like be the most genetically gifted at all. So if you're banking on winning the genetic lottery at anything, that's too bad. You're not going to have had that. Like not everybody's going to be a Nikola Tesla or like a Michael Jordan or anything like that. But then you think about Michael Jordan, who was known for insanely practicing and having the best fundamentals. So like in order to be the best of all time, which is again lofty, it's a one of one, then you're going to have to be genetically blessed, but also very, very hardworking. But if you just want to settle for being top 10 of all time, let's think about Larry Bird, who even made fun of himself for being really unathletic and everything like that. And yet won 3 straight MVPs and all this stuff. So like you can get an awful long way while people are just like they are not built for that and overcome it anyway through a heck of a lot of
Right.
hard work. So like the whole genetic thing always throws me because it's just like you're mad because you didn't win the genetic lottery. You can't go back in time and repick parents and then wind up the same person. So like I don't know what you're moping about then. As someone with a couple of different genetic
Yeah. It's just
diseases,
not
like
productive.
you could sit around and whine about it, or like you can overcome and decide to like do something about it anyway.
Yeah, I think most people would be plenty happy being a top 10 basketball player of all time, right? Like Larry Bird, So, anyways, the point is, if you want, you might not be the absolute best without all the genetic factors, but you can be pretty dang good by just, working your tail off and controlling the things that you can control. And you definitely embody the whatever it takes mentality. I mean, you know, going through college, and living in the city of Chicago was not an easy task. And then afterwards, you know, doing the things that you've done and traveling to the places you've traveled. Like I said, I don't think, I don't know if I would have done all the things you've done if I was presented with the same situation. It's very hard to say that I would. So I think it's really important that people understand, like, if you want something, you're you know you might be put in circumstances that are less than optimal, and the whole reason that you're going to be better than the other people is because you're willing to do whatever it takes and not just set these boundaries on yourself and be like, well, I'm willing to work this hard but no harder, right? I think a lot of kids do that. I think they have like some set idea of like how hard they're supposed to work, and that's about how hard I'm going to work. And it's like you can't set boundaries. You might have to work a lot harder than the next
Hmm.
guy.
Well, it is scary. Like if you know, like deep within yourself that you are holding back a little bit, if you fall short, then you can go, oh, well, maybe I probably could have done it. I just didn't put my all into it. But then still the end result is you didn't achieve what you wanted to or even have a chance at it. You're going to have to, live with that regret of, I don't know that I could have because I didn't really put everything in. And if you do put everything in and then you fall short, at least then Um, and like you said, I mean, we kind of didn't get to the other career stuff and everything I've had, but like I've had to put myself out there, and then try to take a step up in life and get kicked back on everything like that with, having 4 different jobs and being a professor and all that stuff. And then deciding like, this isn't enough. I'm going to search for different jobs and did that a lot. And then wound up moving to Alaska in order to be a strength coach for the Army. Wound up being discriminated against, allegedly. They were still going through all the legal stuff with that and being instantly stranded in Alaska after being there just for a few months because somebody was a jerk and didn't understand disabilities or how things are supposed to be done and everything like that, and wound up getting me fired. And yeah, but because I took those leaps and everything like that, I wound up getting to meet my wife and having some really cool experiences. And now,
Right.
got to travel all over the place and had the opportunity to go help people in Colombia, down in Medellin. And like, as long as you're putting yourself out there, like it may result in something different than you thought, but you're going to actually accrue experiences because you did put yourself out there and actually try.
Well, let's talk about kind of what you got going on, your recent competitions. I know I haven't heard much about the most recent competition, so it'll be a first for me. But yeah, let's kind of go through the stuff that you've done this past year for Strongman, and then after that, we can go through more of like what King Abel's got going on and what you're offering on that
Yeah,
front.
sounds good. Let's see. So it's been 2, 3 years since I'd competed with, you know, moving to Alaska and all that stuff. And then there's only a couple competitions in the whole state there per year. Um, and I actually had to leave just prior to them having them and everything, and then was back in Illinois and bouncing around. So I was just not in a position to compete. It was more survival mode, and I was like, I really do want to get back into this. So I didn't really have it in me to do adaptive strongman, which is basically strongman for people with different kinds of disabilities. But I was like, you know what, let's give that a go and kind of see what that's like, since I work with so many other people with disabilities. And so in October, I went to America's Strongest Athlete with Disabilities up in Atlantic City, and that was fun. Kind of getting my feet wet and getting used to competing a little bit again, because it is different. I'm very much a fan of adults who actually compete in something, because I think it adds more purpose, and it's good to confront those different things in an actual competition setting, and not just, oh, I'm having fun at the gym, and if I fall short, like, nobody was watching anyway. Um, so do that,
Right.
and got to carry a car on my back there, and do a Husfeld carry and a car deadlift and things like that. Actually, all the other guys in my class wound up dropping out. One got sick, and two just didn't show up. So I was all hyped up and everything for that. I don't remember if I told you about this, but like the promoter came over and was like, "You're Evan, right?" And I was like getting my music going and like getting pre-workout and everything like that. And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "No one else in your class showed up, so you're competing alone. Congratulations, you win." And I was like, "Well, this sucks." So it was good to kind of just get the jitters out. And we got a sweet belt for it. It's like a big wrestling belt. I don't know where it is, otherwise I'd show it on camera. Um, so did that.
Well, you would have won anyways.
I would have done okay. Yeah. So I would have been going against actually the current world champion in my class. But it lined up well for me.
Okay.
And I was emotionally ready to like lose a finger. It just trying hard. But luckily, I got back off and got to meet some people and be a little bit more friendly instead of just like being in that crazy competitive mode. Um, but then wound up doing an online qualifier in order to compete at the World Championships then in Birmingham, England, and did that at the beginning of November. Um, Wound up doing decent there. I mean, excuses are excuses. I I wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating much. The travel, I actually got reverse jet lag somehow, so I was like waking up at 2 in the morning there, and when I should have been wanting to sleep in an extra 5 hours. But yeah, had a good time. Met a lot of
Right.
cool people and everything. Wound up getting second by like 2.5 points. So it was like in two different events. If I would have gotten like one more rep in two separate events, then I would have won. So it was good to know that like I'm right behind the people who've been consistently competing and everything like that. And I was first out of all the people with visual impairments in the world. So that's where I was able to say that I'm the world's strongest blind man. And then I just got back from Madison, Wisconsin. There was official strongman games, which is, so there's world's strongest man that everybody sees on ESPN, which is like, the big fat guys. And then
Mhm.
there's all the weight classes, all the women, the masters, everything. And they just added teams. And that's what official strongman games is. It's world's strongest, anything else. So that was in Madison, Wisconsin. And we did a little adaptive strongman showcase where I got to go out, and not really any pressure, but we're all competitors. So there was like three of the better guys in the world there, and we actually had a nice spread of the different kinds of disabilities and everything as well. And so we got to go out there and do an axle deadlift for some reps. So pulled 500 for five, nice and easy actually. uh, on an axle, carry a Volkswagen on our back, which is just under 600 pounds. Did that very handily as well. And then there was also log max reps in a minute, and oh my gosh, the sandbag run. So the big competition, I had to do like 2 sandbags and then push a sled back. But they just had us run a couple of sandbags down. So I did a 325 sandbag and a 275 sandbag, which got a little bit of notoriety and stuff. So it
Wow.
was a good chance to network and hang out with literally some of the strongest people of all time and just be like, hey, what's up? And again, normalize that because we didn't even dig into the stories of me embarrassing myself. But yeah, so that's the most recent stuff. So now I kind of have that competition bug in me again. So and some different opportunities to maybe like travel to Norway or different places around the world to compete. So currently in an off season mode, just building up, trying to just get bigger and then stronger and injury free with all the extra stuff that I got going, and also building up things for K and Able.
Awesome. And then let's go into, hey, what do you like? What is Cane and Able? What exactly do you guys do with that? What do you offer? Go through that for me.
Yeah, so K Enable Fitness is my company that me and my brother Bryce started. He helps with the website and everything. And that was in July of 2020. COVID was happening. Decided I've been wanting to start this company and this resource for a long time in order to help the blind around the world, especially with how I was treated. And I was one of the bigger, stronger people at the gym at UIC, and I know you were there for several occasions when people would come up and be like, "Oh, it's so great that you're here." I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm lifting. Like I did lift to 500 pounds today. Like I'm not like a mascot. It's like great that I'm in the building." Um, or there were
What did the one guy call me? What did the guy call me? Your special what?
almost like a special buddy or something.
Well, yeah, like, or maybe he said something and then you maybe ran with it and you started calling me your special helper buddy.
Yeah, yeah, because they were like, "Oh, like they didn't think we were training partners. They thought it was like some sort of weird charity case."
Yeah, they
Yeah,
thought you were like
so
my charity case or
yeah,
whatever.
and I was like, no, we're friends and stuff, and like I'm very grateful for any time that he helps me. I mean, that's how our friendship started was helping him.
Well, you're also jacked.
Yeah, I did a
So what I don't understand is you're also jacked. So how did they not think that you work out? Like,
well, they just thought it was great that I was just there and didn't care about the performance. It was which we see a lot in the blind community, where it's just like, oh, it's great that you participated, and like, no, 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 I'm here to actually do things. Like it should be a meritocracy. Okay. Side note: do you remember the guy
right?
who I was in that squat rack over by the lifting platforms, and I was squatting, and that guy came over and he was like, "Hey, we're all the squat racks are taken, so we're gonna take your weight off and we're gonna put the bar down a couple because I'm not as tall as you, and then we're gonna put my weight on. I'm gonna do it, and then we'll take it off and we'll reset it for you, and we'll go back and forth." And I was like, "No, man, like I got 3 plates on here. Like I'm not. I'm gonna finish my stuff, and then you can have a rack or something." And he's like, "No, no, no, that's fine. We're just gonna do it like that." And I was like, "No." And he's like, what? We
I don't know if I remember that.
you don't? Okay, so maybe you'll remember the next part. So I get back to my set and everything, and he acted like he was gonna leave, and then he wound up hovering around, and he was like 15 feet away from me, and then he like was progressively getting closer, and like during my rest periods, was like sitting on the safety pins and stuff, and he like kept getting creeping closer and closer.
Oh, now I
Yeah, and then,
remember. You came over. Didn't you come over and ask if he was still there
well, you
or
were on the
something?
platform
And
right next to me, so I was able to be like, actually, I didn't even ask you. I was just like, I'm gonna see how close this guy gets. I'm gonna let him waste his time. I don't care. And eventually he got like real close. Like he could have reached out and touched me. And you're like, "Hey dude, he's using the rack, okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know. I just wanted to see if he knew I was here or not." And I was like, "Yeah, man, I knew you were here the whole time. Go
oh,
away." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And like, so you called him out, and I was like, "Yeah, bro, I knew you were here the whole time. I'm just letting you waste your time." So we had weird,
now I remember that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that and all the other dumb stories I could talk about. I was like, if I'm being doubted this much,
Yeah, you know what? We should do another one. Do another podcast. We'll do another
uh,
podcast. Let's just we can do this regularly, but we'll definitely do another podcast. And the whole podcast will just be trying to recant dumb gym stories.
sounds good. We got to remember the one where I lit up a guy whose family was mafia, and you saved me. We got to remember that one. Uh,
Yeah, you gotta quit telling the stories
I
now,
know, but I
though.
want to I want to remember. Well, this is it's a sneak peek for people. Um, but yeah, I was like, if I'm being treated like this all the time, like how bad is it for other people in the blind community? And it turns out it's really bad. So started this resource, Can Enable Fitness, produced a ton of articles. I do remote coaching and help people even with visual impairments remotely through different means. Have different online purchasable programs, ton of YouTube, Instagram stuff. And then luckily now I also get to go speak at conferences. I'm kind of like a subject matter expert when it comes to exercise, especially in the visually impaired community and disabled community outright. So I speak at different conferences, and organizations will pay to bring me in. In February, as an example, I'm going to go speak at a conference for practitioners for the blind, like teachers for the blind, orientation mobility specialists who like help you learn how to use your cane and be able to get around everything. And obviously, fitness is a big part of that, independence. And speaking at the Arkansas School for the Blind, and then another organization called World Services for the Blind. So I get to do things like that and run in-person seminars, even on specialized topics like fall prevention, which is hugely important for especially older people who develop like macular degeneration, things like that. So, yeah, I'm trying to do a bunch of different stuff, working on potentially doing some different collaborations with different companies or especially big people in the fitness space, reaching out and trying to get that to happen in order to help build more awareness for just how capable you can be with a visual impairment, even though a lot of society says, hey, you got a disability or you're getting older and have a disability and you just sit on the bench, you're fine. Like you don't have to do anything when it's everybody's right to be able to be as fit and encouraged as possible. So just working on building that up and increasing that awareness.
And when's your next competition?
I kind of want to do one before, so I'm going to go work at a it's like a boot camp for blind teens, basically, in a role there for 3 weeks in St. Louis, and then probably straight. I don't get to go home. I get to go straight to New York to work running exercise stuff for a blind sports camp in Upper New York. So I want to hit a competition against normal people, especially like some big boys. Uh, Probably before that, like April, May, maybe. So I'm building up towards maybe doing
Nice.
that if there's the right competition kind of nearby. And then otherwise, it's going to be probably that circuit of official strongman games and the world championships late next year.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll have to help you, or we'll have to chat off camera about some stuff that we can work on with the pressing.
Absolutely. I need all the help I can get.
Cool, man. Well, I like to end this right around an hour, so let's end it here, and then we'll just plan to get together again soon and do
All
another one.
right. Sounds great, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan, for coming on, and we'll see you next time on the Richmond Elite Podcast.